Hello guys and welcome back to another episode of Exos Heroes, and today we're going to be sharing with you guys some very exciting news. That is, as of today, Season 2 of Exos Heroes will be officially upon us once we get an update later on. And with that, we're going to be getting 3 new heroes on top of the new Fate Core Valentina that's coming out today as well. So we're gonna take a quick look at these 3 heroes and see just what kind of value do they bring. And frankly, upon first glance, I think these are going to be some meta-defining heroes, and we might see a pretty big meta shift yet again. So let's take a quick look. We're going to get the 3 heroes, which are going to be Dorka, Naomi, and Clock. So let's start with Dorka first. So she is going to be a chaos hero. As we can see here, she has a focus shot 3 passive, and that is a unique passive that's uniquely to all the chaos heroes out there. So it's pretty straightforward. We've seen that on a lot of heroes. In particular, we've seen that on Rira, FC Rira, so I think everyone's very familiar with that. Another part of her passive is this thing called Grace of Mana, and oh my god, we don't have anything like that yet, and this is going to be the first one, and it grants 1 permanent mana to all allies. So this is by far the strongest mana generating passive in the game. At the moment, we either have Flow of Mana, which grants permanent 1 mana to the back row, or I believe it's a Breath of Mana for everyone on the front row. So this one essentially doubles up on both of them, right? So it's just 1 mana to everyone. Very, very strong. And then it gets better. She also gets the Soul Bound, and what it does is grants an ally with less attack than herself. So given that she is a chaos hero, probably has decent attack, so it grants everyone with lower attack than herself with the Soul Bound mark, which allowed them to heal 30% of missing health every single turn, and reduces magic damage taken by 30%. I mean, like, how do we even take this? I mean, it's just so strong. I feel like this skill alone, I think, would change dramatically the landscape in this game, especially in the PvP area. This is obviously going to be a very strong PvE passive to have, as you can bring this in, and it's going to just generate sustain and magic damage reduction for your entire team. Very useful, but in the PvP scenario, this is going to severely limit what type of hero can you bring, because especially on days where it's not tag team days, so you're only bringing 1 team, you almost have to just believe that the opponent's team is going to have a Dorka on them, right? And if that's the case, you're never going to want to bring any magic attack hero like Bathory. She essentially becomes obsolete because of this new passive, because who's going to bring them in if they're only going to do 70% of the damage? And to me, I don't know, I really don't like this. It's so strong. You know, like, as a hero, I love it. Like, she is just so OP, but at the same time, to me, I think the biggest issue whenever it comes to game design is you never want to take away that variety and take away that flexibility. And I think this is exactly what this new hero does. She comes in and reduces magic damage taken by 30%. I mean, wow, that's amazing. So I think for anyone who has her, obviously she is going to get slotted right into your lineup just for her passives, right? Obviously, I think this would make a frontline heavy team comp even better, especially given if you bring a lot of heavy hitting front row heroes who typically have a little bit less attack. All of them will benefit from the Soulbound mark, as most of them will definitely have less attack than Dorka. So very interesting. And then let's move on to her actives. A1 requires 2 mana, so pretty efficient, very good, I like that. Deals AoE damage at 63% to all enemies. That's very good, and afflicts target with bleed, and deal 39% damage every turn for 2 turns. So overall, this is a solid skill, pretty straightforward. Dot damage, AoE, decent amount of damage for relatively low mana at 2, so I like it. And obviously her A2 does piercing damage at 367% to 1 enemy. So a very typical chaos hero kit, so nothing really special there, but I do think her basic passives are just so strong. Now, with that being said, let's move on now to take a look at Naomi. So Naomi is going to be a defense hero or defender, as she has the block 3 passive, which I really like. I think we mentioned many times before, block 3 is very consistent and provides great utility to your team. It's one of those better defensive skills in the defender tree. She also has this new passive called Rigid Body, which allows her to essentially become immune to damage from sheer health if affected with Soulbound. So obviously this comes with Dorka. Without Dorka, she will never be able to use this skill. But this is pretty strong, and it really makes her very much a top tier defender whenever Dorka is there, because her A2, what it allows her to do is very similar to the typical Protect passive. It allows her to increase her own maximum health by 37% for 8 turns. That's great. Given that she is a defender, 37% is a decent chunk. And also increases her own defense by 37% for 8 turns as well, and that is huge. I don't know exactly how her defense stat will look, but given that she will most likely be either a fated or legendary hero, she must have pretty good defense to start out with. So 37% is gonna be a decent chunk as well. So just the buffs themselves will definitely make her a lot more tankier. But at the same time, she also gets sheer health to all allies for 16 turns. And that is great. Essentially, what Sheer House does is it allows you to take 30% of the incoming damage away from your ally and absorb those damage yourself. But if she is paired with Dorka and able to utilize her Rigid Body passive, then she won't even have to take that 30% damage for your allies. It just goes away. So essentially, she just removes 30% of the damage that your ally would receive. So yeah, very strong. Obviously, the buffs themselves are already good, but if you do have the ability to pair her with Dorka and utilize the Rigid Body, then she just becomes a very strong tank. And I think she's very similar to someone like, who do we have? Degas, as well as Luke. I think the passive itself definitely puts her slightly above those two, even though she doesn't really have a second CC skill apart from her passive. Definitely up there for me as one of the top tier, if she is legendary, one of the top tier legendary, and definitely up there among the good fated heroes as well. And her A1, just a very straightforward A1 that does 375% damage to one enemy. We won't linger on that too much. And lastly, the third hero we're going to look at today is going to be Clock. And Clock looks really cool. I really like the way he looks. Just like a crazy jester. And I think looking at his passive here, Mana Absorbs 3, I think he's going to be yet another Chaos hero for us. And his unique passive is also going to synergize with Dorka, as Dorka is the leader. So let's take a look at that. Absorb Soul. Healing 100% of all damage from damage over time effect on all enemies if affected with Soulbound. So yet again, another pretty strong passive. Perhaps the weaker of the three we've mentioned today, but I still think this is a very solid skill to have, because essentially what it allows him to do is just to heal on a very consistent basis. Because obviously damage over time effect procs every single turn as long as, you know, it's active on the enemy. So even during the times when Clock is not attacking someone, right? This is not like lifesteal. Even when he's not attacking, he's still able to heal 100% of all the damages. So that's pretty good. And the fact that he himself can cast an AoE dot with his A1, that means he will most likely be able to use this pretty consistently. And I think if we're looking at this passive one more time, right? Heals 100% of all damages from damage over time effect on all enemies if affected with Soulbound. I don't think it even has to be his own dot damage, right? So if you pair him with other heroes that has damage over time, that means essentially he's going to be healing pretty much all the time if you can somehow keep the dot damage on the opposing team. It's just really strong. And particularly if you think that when you pair him with Dorka, Dorka has the ability to allow your allies to heal 30% of missing health every single turn. I think his sustain is just going to be through the roof. His overall damage isn't crazy. His A1 only 300% damage to a single target, but again, the mana cost is pretty low. His A2 costs 3 mana, so also very effective and does 90% damage to all enemies, and then for 3 turns, the dot does 40% per turn. So overall, it's a pretty solid damage skill. Nothing amazing, but when you combine that with his crazy sustain when paired with Dorka, I think it's just going to make him really, really annoying. Overall, if I would rank Clock, he might be somewhere kind of a middle of the pack type of hero. I do think a lot of his value comes from his synergy with Dorka, So without Dorka, then the rest of his kit looks relatively mediocre. But if you can somehow pair him with Dorka, I think his value definitely goes up quite significantly. And there you go guys, that's our first impression of these 3 heroes. Again, I think the introduction of Dorka is really going to change the dynamic in the PvP area yet again. I think a lot of the top tier magical heroes are going to have a bit of a hard time for a while. I feel like Battery has just taken yet another hit. First we had Wet Fog coming from FC Iris, and now we've got yet another passive that's kind of targeted at her. I feel really bad for her, but that's just the way it is. Other heroes like Valentina as well as Diva, all these hard-hitting magic damage heroes I feel like are going to fall down the ladder just a little bit. They're still going to be very useful during the tag team days, but on the other days, it's going to be a gamble to bring them in, because I just can't think of any reason why you wouldn't run Dorka if you do have her, but we'll see. So that's gonna be it for us today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. And again, if you guys have a different take on these heroes, feel free to let us know. We'd love to hear what you think about them. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and subscribe, and feel free to check out the rest of our videos on Exos Heroes. And we will see you in the next episode very, very soon. Bye bye.